What's your most horrifically embarrassing Norte story? Story 1. The house was quiet. My roommate James wasn't due back for hours. He's the sweet, geeky type, the kind of guy who'll hum Zelda music while making spaghetti and blush if you so much as walk past him in a towel. Adorable, right? But painfully awkward. And maybe it was exactly because of that, his shy, oh-so-proper nature, that the idea of doing something a little naughty in our shared space was, well, tempting. Picture it. I was sitting on the couch, controller in hand, replaying Skyward Sword. Or trying to. But my mind was elsewhere. Let's just say my thoughts weren't entirely on Link's heroics. I figured a little indulgence couldn't hurt. Just a bit of teasing. Nothing crazy. James wasn't coming back anytime soon, and honestly, the thrill of doing something so risque on our couch was making my skin tingle. So there I was, legs curled up, blanket ready to cover me at a moment's notice. My fingers wandered, innocently at first, until, well, they didn't. Fast forward 5 minutes, and let's just say, I was very distracted. The game controller? Long forgotten on the floor. My breath? Shaky. My body? Let's just call it a work in progress. And then, just as I was teetering on the edge, I heard it. The key in the lock. Panic mode, engage. I yanked my blanket over me, scrambled to fix my clothes, and tried desperately to look like a perfectly innocent gamer girl who had definitely not been seconds away from. Well, you get the idea. James stepped in, his usual rumpled hoodie and easygoing smile in place. "Hey," he said casually, dropping his bag by the door. "Hi." My voice cracked. I cleared my throat, willing my racing heart to calm down. He plopped down on the opposite end of the couch, our couch, completely oblivious. "What are you playing?" "Zelda." My voice was an octave too high, but he didn't seem to notice. And then, oh, no, the wet patch. Right there, on the cushion, glistening, still warm. I froze, my entire body screaming internally as he leaned back, his hand casually resting way too close to the evidence of my not-so-innocent activities. "Did you spill something?" he asked, his brow furrowing slightly. My brain short-circuited. Yeah, water. Totally. Just water." He tilted his head, glancing at the spot. "It doesn't look like water." Cue internal screaming. I laughed, awkwardly, painfully, desperately trying to come up with something, anything to explain it away. But my brain, completely blank. And then, he reached out, pressed his finger against the wet patch. My stomach dropped. My cheeks burned. My heart, racing so fast I was sure he could hear it. He held up his finger, inspecting it for a moment. And I forgot how to breathe. Story 2. So here's the setup. My friend and I decided to split a hotel room for a mutual friend's wedding. Simple, right? Save on costs, keep things easy. But here's the catch. We both knew we'd end up, let's just say, getting intimate with our wives in the same room that night. Well, we didn't know just how far things would go. The reception had been a total blast. Drinks flowing, good vibes all around, and well, maybe a little too much celebratory indulgence. By the time we stumbled back to the hotel, we were all incredibly tipsy, a little stoned, and very much in the mood. The room? Dimly lit, just enough to navigate. We stripped down, crawled into bed, and barely 5 seconds passed before we heard it. The unmistakable sound of my buddy's wife going to town on him. I swear, my wife didn't even hesitate. She reached over, grabbed me with a smirk, and said, "Don't have to tell me twice." And just like that, she was doing the same. It was one of those surreal moments where you're fully aware of what's happening, but you can't stop yourself from enjoying it. Everyone was in their own world, until my wife decided to stir the pot. She kissed her way up my chest, leaned in close, and whispered, "Watch this, I'm gonna turn the light on." I didn't even have time to respond before the room lit up, and there they were, my friend and his wife, fully locked in a 69. For a second, they froze, caught off guard. But my wife? Oh no, she wasn't about to let them feel awkward. She started cheering them on, telling them how hot they looked, and honestly, it worked. They relaxed, laughed it off, and things escalated real quick. Suddenly, the women were, well, exploring each other, while my friend and I sat on the sidelines having this silent, wide-eyed conversation. You know, the kind where you're like, "Are you cool with this?" And the other person's like, "Yeah, I'm cool if you're cool." And apparently, they had the same kind of chat because before we knew it, the whole vibe shifted. His wife was suddenly on me, her hands, her mouth, everything, and my wife was doing the same to him. It was wild. And when it came time to go all the way, yeah, we swapped. I had his wife bent over, my hands gripping her hips, while he had my wife on her back, her gorgeous DDs bouncing with every motion. It's hard to even describe the energy in the room. Intense, electric, but somehow still playful and fun. We switched back after a while, each finishing with our own wives, and, well, let's just say the night ended with a lot of satisfied smiles and a very messy bed. Story 3. Alright, let me set the scene for you. There's a gym I go to regularly, and there's this dynamic duo, a mother and daughter who are both absolute showstoppers. Like jaw-on-the-floor levels of stunning. Now, while most people's attention was on the daughter, I couldn't help but keep sneaking glances at her mom. There was just something about her, classy, confident, and let's be honest, absolutely gorgeous. But let's face it, the daughter was the easier one to approach, so I shot my shot with her. We started hanging out. Casual dates, nothing too serious. But even while I was with her, every time I saw her mom at the gym, yeah, my eyes would wander. I couldn't help it. Fast forward to this one particular day. The daughter and I had plans, a downtown date. I was supposed to pick her up at 6 p.m. sharp. I show up right on time, knock on the door, and guess who answers? Her mom. She smiles and tells me her daughter is running late, something about finishing up work, but she'd be home in about an hour. I was about to leave and come back later, but her mom insists I stay and wait. No big deal, she says. So, I'm chilling on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when I hear it, the sound of the shower turning on. Now, I don't know what came over me, but curiosity got the better of me. I glanced toward the hallway and realized the bathroom door was half open. And through the crack, her mom, taking a shower. Here's the kicker, she saw me too, through the bathroom mirror. But instead of shutting the door or saying anything, she just smiled. Like really smiled. And then she whispered, "Come in." Let me tell you, I didn't even hesitate. My brain, completely shut off. I walked in, and before I could even process what was happening, she stepped out of the shower, dripping wet, and, well, things escalated fast. It was wild, intense, passionate, and clearly something we'd both been thinking about for a while. We didn't stop until we heard the front door open. Her daughter was home. I quickly pulled myself together, and a few minutes later, we were out the door on our date like nothing had happened. But here's the twist. After I dropped the daughter off later that night, she invited me up to her room. I figured, sure, why not? Story 4. You've heard the stories, right? Guys' group chats are supposedly wild, packed with trash talk, crazy memes, and yeah, some pretty questionable photos. But have you ever wondered what happens in a women's group chat? I'll tell you this much, it's not what you think. And today, I'm spilling the tea on something I'm pretty sure 99% of women's chats don't have. But ours? Oh, we've got something special. So there's 4 of us in the group. There's me, my best friend, we're both 36, a girl in her early 20s I used to work with, and then there's Ms. Dirty Mind. She's 38, wildly confident, and absolutely hilarious, the kind of woman who, after a couple of drinks, will absolutely flash her, assets without hesitation. And let me tell you, she's got plenty to show off. This all kicked off a few months ago, thanks to her. She'd just started dating this guy, and from the moment she met him, she couldn't stop talking about how blessed he was. You know what I mean? Every woman's had at least one, that guy. Anyway, the night of their first big date, she sends us a selfie in the chat. Tight dress, looking like a total goddess. Seduction mode, activated. Fast forward a few hours, and our group chat buzzes with a new notification. Now you have to understand, our chat is already a wild mix of naughty selfies, memes, and things that should probably never be screenshotted. But this was something else entirely. She's bragging. Ladies, I wasn't lying, it's huge. Naturally, our youngest, who's still waiting for her first, big experience, jumps in. She's jealous, curious, and a little too bold for her own good. How big we talking? She asks. Then as a joke, or so we thought, she adds, add him to the chat so he can send proof. And here's the kicker, he actually did. Next thing we know, a picture pops up. And not just any picture, it's him, clearly very well endowed, with her lips right there in the frame. I swear, the group chat went wild. Messages started flying. OMG, you're so lucky. Holy sh*T, that's thick. Can I borrow him if it doesn't work out? It was pure chaos, and honestly, we were crying laughing. A week later, we're sitting at a coffee shop, still cracking up about the whole thing, when my best friend suddenly starts giggling. Like, uncontrollably. Finally, she blurts out, "Okay, I have to confess. I took one too." We're stunned. She pulls out her phone and shows us a photo of her with a completely different guy, but let me tell you, same vibe. Perfect size, perfect shape, and honestly enough to make anyone blush. She doesn't just stop there. She sends it to the group chat with a challenge. Whoever doesn't submit one by the end of the month buys dinner. Now, I'm not one to back down from a challenge. 30 minutes after I get home, I send mine in. It's my boyfriend, 7.5 inches and looking absolutely perfect. The group's reaction? Final eye. We've been waiting for this. But of course our youngest, the baby of the group, still hadn't submitted. She panicked. She started swiping like crazy on dating apps, determined not to lose. And this is where things got really fun. Turns out, Ms. Dirty Mind had been scheming behind the scenes. She decided to set our youngest up with the same big guy she'd been bragging about. Purely for the chaos, of course. A few hours later, the group chat buzzes again, and there it is. A picture of her smiling from ear to ear, holding the same massive, that we'd all been hyping up all week. I couldn't resist. I asked, "Where's all his, She replied with nothing but a tongue emoji. We lost it. She was thrilled. He felt like an absolute king, and honestly, it was iconic. Since then, the photo trend has kinda died down. We all retired after 2 submissions each. Well, except me, I bowed out early. But don't worry, this group chat is far from boring. We're already brainstorming our next trend, and trust me, it's going to be just as wild. So stay tuned, because you never know what secrets might spill next. Story 5. We picked Istanbul for our 2nd wedding anniversary, a city as vibrant and full of life as the spark we were reigniting. After months apart due to work commitments, my wife Sarah and I were finally getting some much-needed time together. We booked a luxurious resort right on the banks of the Bosphorus, with villas tucked away in secluded corners of the property. Perfect, or so we thought. The moment we closed the door to our villa, it was like a spark ignited. 6 months apart had left us craving each other, and let's just say we made up for lost time. The king-sized bed became our playground for 2 days straight. We didn't step outside once. Room service took care of everything, and that "do not disturb" sign? Well, it got a workout too. I vaguely remember hearing the doorknob of the connecting door click once or twice, but honestly, it was hard to focus on anything else. We were in our own little world. By the 3rd morning, we finally emerged to try the Turkish breakfast spread, and wow, it did not disappoint. But amidst the delicious food, I couldn't help noticing a middle-aged woman sitting a few tables away. She kept sneaking glances at us, a faint smile playing on her lips. It wasn't long before she realized she'd been caught. Instead of looking away in embarrassment, she stood up, walked toward us, and introduced herself. "I'm Elaine," she said, her smile growing a little coy. "I'm staying right next to your room, and I have a confession to make." Sarah and I exchanged a look, unsure of what was coming. Elaine hesitated for a moment before continuing, her cheeks flushing pink. "Let's just say, you two were very, lively the last couple of nights." It was hard not to hear. Our faces turned crimson in an instant. I was about to stammer out an apology when she stopped me mid-sentence. No, it's not you who should be apologizing," Elaine said, her tone now softer. I'm the one who needs to say sorry. Last night, I accidentally opened the connecting door. I didn't realize it wasn't locked." Time stood still as her words sunk in. Elaine admitted that when she saw us, she froze, unable to look away. She apologized profusely, but there was something in her demeanor, a subtle mix of guilt and intrigue, that lingered in the air as she excused herself and hurried off. The rest of the day was surreal. We toured Istanbul's iconic landmarks, Hagia Sophia, the Blue Mosque, the Hippodrome, but neither Sarah nor I could stop thinking about Elaine's confession. The idea that someone had seen us in such an intimate moment should have left us mortified. And yet, there was this strange, electrifying tension between us. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was something deeper, something exhilarating. When we returned to our villa that evening, Sarah immediately checked the connecting door. I assumed she'd lock it, but instead she turned the handle, leaving the door ajar. Then, without a hint of emotion, she said, "This stays open tonight." My heart raced. "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "As serious as I was when I married you," she said, a mischievous glint in her eye. "If she wants to watch, she might as well get the full show." I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but the rush of adrenaline and desire was undeniable. That night, knowing that someone might be watching, everything felt heightened. Every touch, every kiss, every sound, it was as if we were performing, not just for each other, but for an invisible audience. At one point, as Sarah rode me with an intensity that left me breathless, I caught a flicker of movement near the connecting door. I glanced over and saw her, Elaine, standing just beyond the doorway. Her silhouette was unmistakable, one hand resting on her chest, the other, well, you can guess. I looked into Sarah's eyes and gave her a subtle nod. She didn't hesitate. Throwing her head back, she moaned louder, her voice echoing through the room. "Oh, Max, you feel so good," she said, her words dripping with passion. The energy in the room shifted. Sarah climbed off me, her body glistening, and got on all fours. Her back arched perfectly, presenting herself to me. I moved behind her, and as I did, I couldn't help but glance toward the door. Elaine's eyes were glued to us, her breath quickening. Sarah noticed too. "Let her watch," she whispered, a sly grin on her lips. The tension reached its peak as we lost ourselves in the moment. Every movement, every sound, every glance added to the intensity. When we finally collapsed onto the bed, spent and breathless, the room was silent except for the faint sound of Elaine retreating back through the door. We didn't speak for a while, both of us processing what had just happened. But deep down, we both knew this trip had unlocked something unexpected, something we weren't quite ready to define but couldn't deny. And as we lay there, tangled in each other's arms, we couldn't help but wonder, where would this lead us next? Story 6. We all have those spontaneous moments, don't we? Well, mine happened after a meeting ended early on one of the hottest days of the year in the UK. I found myself near Clacton, and with the sun blazing and the day wide open, I decided to visit one of the local nudist beaches. It's not my usual spot, but on a weekday, I figured it would be quiet and peaceful, a perfect escape to unwind and soak in some sun. After parking the car, I made my way along the sea wall to the start of the nudist section. Once I crossed the metal steps, I found a suitable spot, stripped down, and tucked my clothes into my rucksack. To my surprise, there were a few people around, a family enjoying the beach, a couple of topless women chatting by the dunes, and interestingly, another pair of women, a younger one in her 20s and an older woman who could easily have been her mother. I wandered along the shoreline where the sand meets the mud, keeping my distance from everyone, and eventually settled on a soft patch of sand. With my towel laid out, I pulled out a pork pie and a cold beer, ready to relax. Of course, as luck would have it, my work phone rang. The signal wasn't great, so there I was wandering the beach, stark naked, talking to my boss and wondering if I should mention my current state. Probably not the best idea. As I paced, I noticed the two women taking photos. Now, for those who don't know, that's a big no-no on naturist beaches. Once my call ended, I decided to politely approach them and explain the etiquette. They were friendly and receptive, especially when I pointed out that the family a bit further down had kids. With that sorted, I returned to my towel, cracked open a second beer, and tried to relax again. It wasn't long before I noticed the older woman walking my way. She looked incredible, confident, with a natural beauty that turned heads without trying. As she approached, she greeted me warmly and asked if it was okay to chat. I nodded, shifted over on my towel, and invited her to join me. We got to talking, and she asked me about the rules of nudist beaches. I joked that sun cream was a big one, especially considering her tan lines. She laughed, mentioning she was trying to even them out. When I asked if she had any sunscreen, she shook her head, so I offered mine. I joked that watching her apply it might break another rule, and she laughed, admitting that the atmosphere had already left her a little, let's say, flustered. She sat at the other end of my towel, completely at ease, and began applying the sunscreen. Watching her casually rub it onto her skin, I couldn't help but admire her confidence. It was hard not to notice the way she moved, the way she carried herself. There was something magnetic about her presence. We continued chatting, the conversation light and playful, with a subtle tension simmering beneath the surface. She mentioned she was on holiday with her daughter, staying in a nearby caravan, and how her daughter had convinced her to visit the beach. She didn't want to come alone in case she got bothered, she said with a grin. I told her she was lucky it was a quiet day, but she'd still want to be cautious. Looks like you'll be spending the week enjoying the sun together, I joked. As our conversation went on, she handed me the sunscreen, turning around and asking if I could help with her back. I obliged, rubbing the lotion into her shoulders and down her spine. When my hands brushed the sides of her chest, she glanced back with a teasing smile. "Don't forget the important spots," she said with a wink. The moment was charged, but it felt natural, like an unspoken understanding between us. As I continued, I noticed her daughter lying on her side, facing our direction. With her sunglasses on, it was hard to tell if she was watching, but I felt the weight of her gaze nonetheless. I leaned closer to the woman and whispered, "Your daughter's looking this way." She didn't flinch, her voice soft but firm. "Don't worry about her," she said, her tone carrying a mix of mischief and reassurance. The rest of the evening was a blur of connection and chemistry. The quiet beach, the warm sun, the shared laughter, it all felt like a moment suspended in time. And while what followed remains a memory I'll keep for myself, let's just say it was a day that reminded me of the unexpected beauty of spontaneity and the allure of living in the moment. Sometimes, life surprises you in ways you didn't see coming, and on that beach in Clacton, under the golden sun, I found myself in the middle of one of those unforgettable moments. Story 8. I'm in my early 20s and working my way through nursing school. Since high school I've babysat for a few families, and I've kept at it because I'm good with kids and honestly, I love the rhythm of their little routines. One of the dads I help out is in his late 40s, now a solo parent of 2 little ones. It's a sad story and not mine to share. I used to watch the kids once in a while, but lately he's been going on dates, so I'm there about once a week. He's gentle and funny and solid. The kind of person who always remembers to ask how your exam went and means it. Finding the right fit has been tough for him. I can tell he likes me. I get that vibe from people sometimes, but he's always been a gentleman. No weird comments, no lingering touches. Just kindness and that quiet, steady way some men have. And I've never exactly hidden that I like him too, in that warm, safe, not trying to mess anything up way. We just understand each other. For a minute, it seemed like he'd found someone. He came home smiling a few times, and I tried not to read into it. Then one night I overheard a tense phone call while I was loading the dishwasher. Nothing dramatic, just tones you recognize when you've lived a little. I still hoped it would work out for him. It didn't. The next week he came back early. The kids were asleep upstairs, their nightlight casting stars on the ceiling, and he walked in with that look people get when they've used up their last reserve of optimism. He put his keys down and tried to make a joke about the place he'd picked for dinner. It landed crooked. He offered to drive me home like he always does, but I could see it in his shoulders, the kind of tired that has very little to do with sleep. I told him I had a few minutes. We did a quick sweep of the living room, picked up a stray sock, stacked the blocks, turned the TV off so the room felt more like itself again. I took his hand and guided him to the couch. Not a dramatic thing, just here, sit. He sank into the cushions. I sat close enough that our knees bumped, angled toward him. I tucked my hair back with a scrunchie I found on my wrist, habit, nerves, both. We were quiet for a beat. He told me a little bit, no details, just the shape of it. It wasn't about anyone being awful. Sometimes 2 good people just don't click right. He stared at the floor like it might have an answer. I put my hands on his shoulders, the way you do when someone's carrying too much, and felt him exhale. The whole room seemed to exhale with him. We talked about tiny things, how the younger one won't eat strawberries anymore because of seeds, how the older one sneaks his library book under the blanket with a flashlight. He smiled at that, soft around the edges. Our fingers found each other without ceremony. It felt honest. If this was a movie, the score would get quiet here. The refrigerator hummed. A car went by and threw a stripe of light across the rug. I leaned in, slow enough that he could meet me halfway or lean away. He met me. It wasn't fireworks. It was something steadier, something that said I see you and I'm here. We didn't rush it. We let the moment be small and kind. The sort of closeness that makes you breathe deeper without realizing you are. His hand drifted to mine. My thumb traced the side of his palm. When we paused, he looked lighter, like a knot had loosened somewhere you can't point to on a diagram. I'm careful with lines. So is he. But there are times in life where you stop overthinking and just choose to show up for each other. That's what it felt like, care, not complication. A space we kept just for us, quiet and respectful, where neither of us had to be brave or funny or fine. Time did that elastic thing it does. Minutes slipped. We said very little. There was a lot in the silence, gratitude, maybe, and relief. I rested my forehead against his for a second. He closed his eyes. I could feel the worry lifting off him in layers, like fog in the sun. Eventually the clock reminded me I had to go. I smoothed the couch cushion out of old habit, stood, and he stood with me. We both laughed at nothing in particular, a little dazed. He took my hands. There was a softness in his face that hadn't been there when he walked in. "Thank you," he said. Just that. Simple and full. "Any time," I told him. "You deserve good." Story 9. So this one is kind of wild. I ran into a friend from high school I hadn't seen in ages. One of those chance moments where you duck into a coffee shop for a quick fix, and the universe decides to throw a plot twist at you. He recognized me right away. We did the whole "no way, it's you" reunion thing, laughed about old teachers, swapped the fastest life updates known to humankind, and promised to catch up properly later. I had places to be, so we picked an evening meet-up and left it at that, both a little surprised at how easy it was to slip back into conversation. That night I went to his place. It was neat in that lived-in, not trying too hard way, records leaning against a shelf, a plant that had clearly survived winter out of sheer stubbornness, a lamp with a warm glow that made the room feel like a pause button. We started on opposite ends of the couch because that's what you do, right? But our words kept inching us closer until our knees bumped, and then his arm slid along the backrest like it belonged there. He brushed my hair away from my ear, the smallest touch, and leaned in. "I've thought about you more than I should," he murmured, steady, a little bold, not what I remembered from the quiet, nerdy guy who always finished his homework early. I blinked, surprised in the best way. Confidence looks different on people you met before they knew who they were. He tipped my chin up with 2 fingers, and for a second we just held each other's gaze, like the room got very still, and we could hear the soft ticking of the kitchen clock through the wall. He kissed me. Not a crash of fireworks, something warmer, more sure of itself, like he'd learned a few things since algebra class. He was careful and present, the kind of kisser who listens with his hands and his breath. I let out a sound I didn't mean to make, tiny and honest, and immediately felt my face heat up. He smiled against my mouth, a little thrill running through me at how natural it felt to smile into a kiss. We took our time. His arms circled me, and the space between us disappeared. It was all clean, quiet closeness, his thumb tracing a lazy line at my shoulder, my fingers finding the hem of his shirt like I'd always known the fabric. The room fell away, all edges softened. He paused to check in. "Is this okay?" And I nodded, cheeks warm, the answer already there in the way I leaned in. I stood without quite meaning to and asked which way the hallway went. He threaded our fingers together and led me, lights low and honey-colored, both of us a little breathless for reasons that had nothing to do with stairs. His bedroom felt like another exhale. Soft lamp, straightened sheets, the kind of order that says you don't have to be perfect to be welcome. We sat on the edge of the bed and just stayed there for a second, hands linked like 2 kids about to jump off a dock. Then we were kissing again, slower this time, words dissolving into little half-laughs and quiet sounds. We let the day fall away piece by piece, worry, small talk, the faces we wear when we're out in the world. It all drifted to the floor between our shoes. He was gentler than I expected and more assured. He held me like I was something to be learned and not rushed, a story you read slow because you don't want to miss the best lines. He mapped patient constellations along my spine. I traced the steady beat at his throat. We didn't narrate it, we just felt our way through, heat expanding and settling, breaths finding a shared rhythm. Every few moments one of us would say, "You okay?" and the other would answer with a yes that sounded like a held note finally resolving. We talked, too, in those quiet spaces between heartbeats. Little nothing things, whose locker had the broken latch, how the cafeteria pizza always tasted like cardboard and hope. It grounded us. It made the room bigger with the good kind of history instead of the heavy kind. I felt brave and calm at the same time, which is rare and addictive. He surprised me in a lot of small ways. A softness where you'd expect swagger, a steadiness where you'd expect nerves. It felt safe, and not in a boring way. There was a moment, several, honestly, when the world narrowed down to the hush of our breathing and the weight of the comforter and the lamp's quiet halo on the wall. He asked me to tell him what I wanted. I laughed because I'm not always great with words when it counts, then found them anyway. He listened. He adjusted. He kept meeting me where I was, and then just a half step beyond, like a dance you pick up without counting. Time stretched and folded over. My pulse skittered. I found his hand and held on. We crossed a line together without fanfare, no dramatic soundtrack, just the clean, good certainty of 2 adults choosing the same thing at the same time. It felt like stepping into warm water you've been testing with your toes for ages, that delicate shiver of yes moving slowly through you. We moved with the room's tide, rising and settling, laughing once when a pillow hit the floor and pretending we meant to do that. Every so often the moment sharpened and went bright at the edges, a hush that wasn't silence at all, but something like a held breath finally let go. We both found that quiet, breathless edge and held it, then eased back with a kind of wordless gratitude. After, The air felt different, lighter, like someone had opened a window we hadn't realized was stuck. We lay there, faces close, saying very little because it felt too good to fill the space. He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and looked at me like he was learning a new language he already knew how to speak. We traded a few more memories, a few new promises that weren't really promises, more like intentions, kindness, clarity, a text tomorrow, breakfast sometime that isn't just a joke. Eventually we sat up, the lamp still pooling gold on the nightstand. We tidied in that half-dazed way people do, straightened the sheet, found my earrings, laughed when one turned up in an impossible place. He walked me back down the hallway, our steps soft on the runner. At the door we both paused, the kind of pause that holds a lot and says exactly enough. "Thank you," he said, simple and full, like he was setting something down gently. I squeezed his hand and smiled. "Any time," I told him, and meant it the way you mean it when what you're really promising is to be careful with a thing that matters. I stepped into the night air feeling a little taller, a little brighter, like I'd been seen and had seen back. We didn't label it. We didn't need to. We just let it be what it was. Unexpected, earned, and very, very kind.